The Bible reading this morning is taken from the Gospel according to St. Matthew, chapter 22, verses 15 to 22. At that, the Pharisees left. They determined to trap this Jesus with his own words. Hang him by his own rope, you might say. They sent a batch of students to him, along with a group that was loyal to Herod. They said, "Teacher, we know you're a man of integrity, and you tell the truth about the way of God. We know you don't cotton to public opinion. And that is why we trust you and want you to settle something for us. Should we, God's chosen people, pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Jesus knew these men were out to trap him. He said, "You hypocrites, why do you show up here with such a transparent trick? Bring me a coin you would use to pay tax." Someone handed him a denarius, and Jesus fingered the coin. And he said, "Of whom is this portrait, and who owns this inscription?" They answered, "Caesar." Jesus said, "Well then, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." And those who had come hoping to trick Jesus were confounded and amazed, and they left him and went away. Lord, may your words live in us and bear much fruit to your glory.
People say that there are two things in life that we cannot avoid: death and taxes. See, we cannot avoid taxes as much as we cannot avoid death in our life. Last year, there was a family in Tasmania who was fined $2 million for tax avoidance. They didn't want to pay income taxes because they believed that paying taxes went against God's will. They believed that God's law was the highest law in the land, that the Commonwealth law had been superseded by God's law, so if they transferred their allegiance from God to the Commonwealth, that meant that they had breached the first commandment in the Bible. And they didn't stop there, friends, because they actually said that all the disasters, the natural disasters that had happened in Australia recently, were the results of people's disobedience of God's law. But the judge who passed the sentence, he disagreed with the family, rightly disagreed. He reminded them that there was nothing in the Bible that said, "Thou shalt not pay taxes." And the judge said that the Bible actually said that the law of God and the law of the land, they operate on two different spheres. Unfortunately, this kind of behavior is not exclusive to the family. It appears again and again amongst people like us, believers, people of faith, the tendency to separate ourselves from the world. One of the most influential theologians in the 21st century was Richard Niebuhr, and he was famous for articulating 5 different paradigms that Christians use to relate to the world. Number 1 is Christ is against culture paradigm. Number 2, Christ is of culture paradigm. Number 3, Christ is above culture paradigm. Number 4, Christ and culture in paradox. And number 5, Christ is transforming culture paradigm. But we, people of faith, we often emphasize only 1 out of 5, which is Christ against culture. There appears amongst us the tendency to see the world as an evil place that has to be avoided at all costs. And as the result of that, we like to create a Christian subculture. We listen only to Christian songs and music. We watch only Christian movies. We read only Christian books or journals. We support only Christian politicians or political parties, and we only listen to Christian speakers. A number of years ago, someone came to me and told me that as a Christian minister, I shouldn't listen to all the secular radio channels out there. I should only listen to Christian radio channel. Now here in Western Australia, in Perth, I think we only have one, which is Sunshine FM. I may be wrong, but as far as I know, there is only one Christian channel, radio channel, which is Sunshine FM. And I love listening to Sunshine FM. I really do. But I also listen to other radio channels because I believe as a person of faith or as people of faith, we have to listen from as many media channels as possible because we need to be well informed about the situation in the world so that we can respond to it. In the reading that we have today, it sounds like Jesus is making life difficult for us. He wants us to be children of God, but he also wants us to be children of the world. And I think that's typical of Jesus. He doesn't like to give an easy answer. He wants us to go to the narrow road. But I think he's right, friends, because if we close our eyes from the cultures around us, if we close ourselves from all the cultures around us, if we are hostile towards them, then there is the danger that people will know us for what we are against than what we are for. But we are never called to hate the world. We are called to love the world. Now, according to statistics, 30% of charity groups in Australia today, they are all religious-based charity, faith-based charity. And I think the vast majority of them would be Christians. And indeed, friends, the Christian missionaries, they were well known for their pioneering works in health and education. They built schools, they built hospitals for people, marginalized people, for disadvantaged people. Of course, they were not perfect. They had made mistakes. Some were terrible mistakes. Some supported the government program of removing Aboriginal children from their families. In the Uniting Church, one of the most influential leaders that we have here in Western Australia was the Reverend Celine Garland. Reverend Celine Garland was a Noongar man, and he was awarded the Order of Australia for the work that he did amongst the Aboriginal communities here in WA. Reverend Garland was a member of the Stolen Generation. He was taken from his family when he was only 6 years old. And for the next 12 years of his life, he only saw his parents 3 times. And it makes me emotional every time I tell this story, friends, because I have sons under 5. And I just can't imagine if someone takes them and I can only see them for the next 10 years of my life for a number of times. It was dreadful. But we must also not forget the good things that the missionaries had done, because they did do good works as well amongst the communities, without forgetting the mistakes that they did. One of the much loved and well-respected charity groups nowadays is the Royal Flying Doctor. And in 2018, it was recognized as the most reputable charity group in Australia. And it held the position for 8 years in a row. Think about it, it's amazing. But the Royal Flying Doctor had a humble origin in the person of Reverend John Flynn. Reverend John Flynn was a Presbyterian minister. He went to serve in a mission, a rural mission 500 kilometers north of Adelaide. And while he was there, he saw firsthand the difficulties that people living in the outback had to face. There were no medical services whatsoever for those people living, for the residents in the outback, and also for the travelers. In 1917, he received a letter from an airman, a young airman, a pilot, who fought in the First World War. And his name was Clifford Peel. And Clifford Peel told Reverend John Flynn the idea of using airplanes to bring medicines to people living in the outback. Now, Clifford Peel, unfortunately, was killed during an air patrol in France, I believe, or somewhere in Europe in First World War, after he sent that letter to Reverend John Flynn. But Reverend John Flynn took his idea, and it became the blueprint for the Royal Flying Doctor. His vision was to create a mantle of safety for the people who lived and worked in the outback. And his vision became a reality when he received big donors from his supporters at the time. Reverend John Flynn passed away in March 1951 from cancer. His ashes was placed in Flynn Memorial, just west of Alice Springs today, right in the center of the vast territory that he served. In 1994, the Reserve Bank of Australia made the decision to put the picture of Reverend John Flynn on our $20 banknote. And there it is. He is still here on this banknote as a reminder of the great man that served this land. Sir William Slim, a former Governor General of Australia, once said of Reverend John Flynn, "His hands are stretched out like a benediction over the inland." His hands are stretched out like a benediction over the inland. And what a great tribute for a great man. As those people who follow Christ, we are not to separate ourselves from the world, from the society. We are to show to other people that we are as concerned and as involved with the issues of the world like everyone else. Yes, of course, we reserve our ultimate loyalty to God, but being loyal to God does not mean that we cannot serve the world. We are as affected as everyone else by the affairs of the world today. Yes, we have obligations to God. We have to nurture our relationship with God. But remember that we also have to transform our society according to the gospel of Jesus Christ. No, we do not have the face of Caesar on our coins or banknotes. We do have the face of Queen Elizabeth, but we also have the face of a person like this man, Reverend John Flynn. A person whose life embodied what it means to be a follower of Christ. A person whose life has become a blueprint for us to follow, to imitate, to become a disciple who loves God and who loves the world. Now, friends, the early Christian communities, they all live as marginalized and persecuted people. They live in a hostile environment in the Roman Empire. People hated them. People saw them as a threat. There was a civil servant in the Roman Empire, a governor in Asia Minor. His name was Pliny. And he said that Christianity was a depraved, excessive, and contagious superstition. In 64 CE, when 2/3 of the city of Rome were burned down, the Emperor Nero blamed the Christians for the fire, and he used that as a reason to persecute Christians. But the believers were called to love their neighbors, including those people who persecuted them. They must show that they were also good citizens of the society who sought for the betterment of their society, like most people. This is beautifully captured in a work of apologetics written in the 2nd and 3rd century, and the work was called The Letter to Diognetus. And it captured beautifully the spiritual direction of Christians at the time. And I'm going to read to you just a brief excerpt of this letter. And I quote, "Christians are indistinguishable from other people either by nationality, language, or customs. They do not inhabit separate cities of their own or speak a strange dialect, or follow some outlandish law or outlandish way of life. With regard to dress, food, and manner of life in general, they follow the customs of whatever city they happen to be living in, whether it is Greek or foreign. And yet there is something extraordinary about their lives. They live in their own countries as though they were only passing through. They play their full role as citizens but labor under all the disabilities of aliens. Any country can be their homeland, but for them, their homeland, wherever it may be, is a foreign country. They pass their days upon earth, but they are citizens of heaven. Obedient to the laws, they yet live on a level that transcends the law. Christians love all people, but all people persecute them. Condemned because they are not understood, they are put to death, but raised to life again. They live in poverty, but enrich many. They suffer dishonor, but that is their glory. They are defamed, but vindicated. A blessing is their answer to abuse, deference their response to insult. For the good they do, they receive the punishment of malefactors, but even then they rejoice, as though receiving the gift of life. They are attacked by the Jews as aliens. They are persecuted by the Greeks, yet no one can explain the reason for this hatred. As the soul is present in every part of the body, while remaining distinct from it, so Christians are found in all the cities of the world, but cannot be identified with the world. End of quote. This is the identity that we should aim for, friends. And this is beautifully described in the letter. We are citizens of the world. We have to be good citizens of the world, but we are also citizens of heaven. In other words, we are citizens of the world who long for a new heaven and a new earth in Christ Jesus. Amen.